Hello everybody, it's Fraser here. I hope you're doing well. Today I'd love to chat with you guys about powering through tough times and how I personally do it. I've noticed that everyone in their life, it seems, has bad times befall them in one way or the other. I think that suffering is sort of a baseline of the human experience, and I'd love to chat with you guys about how I have created sort of a framework to maneuver through that. I am no stranger to suffering, and I, in the last sort of few years, have created a philosophical framework that I would love to share with you guys and get your feedback on. It's always an evolving process, but I think you guys will find it useful. There's three main things to my philosophy of sort of how to suffer well, let's say. I call it the wheel of misfortune, and there's three pillars. The first pillar is sort of a Roman era Stoicism philosophy framework that I've poured it over. The second one is a sort of a steal from logotherapy, a branch of psychotherapy. And the third one is sort of mechanical insights, or mechanical inserts rather, that I apply to my thinking when I'm going down the rabbit hole, thinking in a negative way or a way that's not useful. So those are the three pillars. On this conversation, we'll just talk about the first one, the Roman era Stoicism philosophical insights, and I'll make two other videos for the other two. So what do I know about suffering? I can tell you that I have been in a few circumstances that have been less pleasant than I would have liked. I've definitely had my share of bad luck, and I've definitely had a few scenarios that are difficult to deal with. Now that doesn't make me unique at all. I think that everyone has periods of time in their life, no matter what their circumstance, where adversity comes around the corner, some more than others. I think, if you're born in sort of like a Western country, you've won the lottery by default to an extent. A lot of the things that could happen to you are mitigated by the fact that, you live in a first world kind of context. But regardless of, how good your upbringing is or how, let's say, privileged you might be in whatever your context is, I think bad things will eventually happen to everyone. The one thing I have noticed, though, is that there are different ways to handle oneself or perceive the bad things as they're happening to you. I've noticed, especially coming from a background in law enforcement where you go to bad things all the time, not necessarily bad for yourself, but bad things happening to other people. Some people handle adversity extremely well. Some people leverage into it almost, where it's like, this is, we're going to flip this bad thing to a good thing in my mind, or in their mind rather. And that's inspiring. And then other people don't handle adversity as well, and seem to spiral out of control. And they let bad times or suffering take control of their lives in a negative way. So essentially, realizing that there's different ways to move through suffering, ways to suffer unnecessarily, and ways to suffer sort of in a positive manner that you can leverage. I sort of realized that suffering or powering through times, or essentially just the skill of resiliency, is actually, like what I just said, it's a bit of a skill set. It's sort of like shooting basketball, there's different ways to do it, but if you got a nice jump shot, like, you're going to have a higher chance of success. So I perceive scenarios now that are sort of initially perceived as negative, like you get in a car crash, things of that nature. I'm able to sort of flip that, use the sort of skill set I've created to the mental framework, or the philosophical frameworks I've created to power through scenarios, because I'm using a skill set I've practiced over and over again to get a positive result. So what kind of, how did I create the wheel of misfortune in the first place? I'll give you just a bit of context for that, and then we'll rip through that first Roman era Stoic point. The first thing that happened to me that sort of forced me into creating this framework out of necessity was in 2017. I ended up getting a bad back injury. I ended up getting my disc herniated at L5-S1, which is sort of like your lower spine, sort of right by your tailbone, if that's approximate. Started sort of innocuously. I just sort of felt pain down my leg. Wasn't too bad. Was able to sort of power through it. Continued to work. I was a police officer at the time, so I had all my gear on. And every time I'd wear all the gear, it sort of like hurt some more. If I went to the gym and I went like do a lift or do a workout, especially with heavy weights, I'd feel pain down my leg pretty badly. And like that nerve pain, that sort of pain that sort of like forces you to lay down. So it eventually got to the point where I couldn't really sit or stand for more than 30 minutes at a time. If I was walking for 30 minutes, I would. After that sort of like, 20 minutes in, I'm like, man, I'm really feeling it. And by 30 minutes, like I had to lay down, or else I was sort of limping almost to a point. So it got pretty ugly. I tried to mitigate that, continued to try to work. I brought like a pillow in, because I found if I sat in a certain position, I could get away with things. So I brought this pillow in, and I'd put it in my police car, and I'd sit, and I'd be in this like specialist position as I was driving around. But it wasn't very ideal. So went to physio, went to chiro, ended up going to a surgeon. I tried everything. I went to like the witch doctor. I went to the psychic. I tried it all. In mystical arts, I was down if there was a possibility, placebo or not, that it could work and get me back into sort of fighting shape. Then I tried it, but to no avail. MRI showed I had the scan. Showed I had a weird herniation, like the disc kind of tore, but then opened up a little bit. Sort of like an onion ring, sort of popped open, and that was unfortunate. So ended up having to get a back surgery about 6 months later. No one's fault, but the back surgery didn't go too well. After sort of the 3-month recovery period, I still wasn't really better, and in looking back at it, actually, I almost was worse. Again, no one's fault. Sometimes that just happens. It's just the luck of the draw. So went back to work, not in a full-time capacity, but sort of, riding the desk kind of thing, and tried to power through it. But again, it was like a 2-year hurdle where, I had to really structure my day. It was like, I get up in the morning, okay, I got about 30 minutes of function here before I got to take a break, I had a little mat at my desk. I'd lay underneath my desk a couple times a day, and often people would come into the room and they'd be like, "Where's Fraser?" And I'd put my hand up, or my legs would be up against the wall or whatever. So it was a bit of a crapshoot at the best times, and that was stressful for me because I was actually in a new agency at the time, in a new city. Didn't really know a lot of people, so I didn't really have a strong network. I had a strong family network and friends network outside of the city, but I was new there, so I didn't really have that personal contact connection, which was unfortunate. But what doesn't kill you makes you stronger, right? And then at the same time, in the policing world, and this is like all jobs, having a good reputation is important, and so you want to be the guy who grinds to get that reputation. And then, of course, in this case, I can grind so much on the desk, but I can't really do my regular job, what I was supposed to be doing when I was would have been hired to do. So that was unfortunate too. So it took a bit of hit there, and again, that's just a hit to to the psyche to an extent. And then lastly, I was super athletic at the time, at least in my own mind. So I was always doing stuff, going for hikes, downhill mountain biking, downhill skiing, playing flag football, doing all sorts of crazy stuff, jumping over fences for fun kind of thing, and working out really hard too. So I was, a lot heavier. I was muscly. I was to the point where I was sweating when I'd walk upstairs because I was, buff guy or whatever. So I was, weightlifting and powerlifting were sort of my baseline. And essentially all of that was out the window. I essentially became quite disabled, which again is okay, but for someone who was not before and then immediately disabled, sort of lost hope there for a little bit. Concurrently, as this all was happening, after about a year after the back surgery, I ended up getting also, just by bad luck, a sort of viral thing that sort of lodged in my immune system and gave me the blue screen of death, So essentially I had a hard reset of my immune system. I had, for about a week straight, rolling anaphylaxis. So just I get the full anaphylaxis, as if I was allergic to peanuts or, pecans or something. And then I'd get the tightening of the throat, the full shutdown response. So spent 4 or 5 days in hospital, and that almost took me out. So, and I remember being in the bed with my still back injury and the leg pain and whatnot, foot pain and what have you. And I'm sitting in the bed being wow, I'm really uncomfortable, but I'm also choking to death. This is not the best scenario to be in. So between the two of those things, almost got me. And that's okay, again, powering through it. And at that point, though, I thought, man, I need to reframe this in a way that's useful for me and something that I need to turn this into a win, And so that's when I sort of went hard in the paint into the sort of philosophical realm, and pulled some insights from all over the place, and then created sort of my wheel of misfortune, which again is that 3-part component philosophical insert that I use now on a daily basis, and I also give to friends and people think it's useful. So I guess we'll go through the Roman era Stoicism stuff, and then the next videos will be the other two. So what is Roman Stoicism and why should you care? So the first bit is Stoicism is sort of a philosophy that it's pre-Christianity. It's sort of before the Christian sort of narrative got a hold in Rome. In the Roman Empire, let's say, one of the main philosophies of the Roman Empire at the time was actually Stoicism, and I'm specifically talking about Roman era Stoicism. There's Stoicism that predates the Roman Empire, but specifically what I'm talking about is the Roman era stuff, which was mostly focused on practical, how to get through the day kind of activity. It was a philosophy of working through problems in a real life scenario. So it wasn't so much about, this exists, but for me it's not as relevant. It's not about so much the metaphysics. It's about a sort of philosophy of life and how to get through the day-to-day experience. So on that concept, there's three big things. And actually, then to back it up even further, the specific book I'm referring to when I'm talking about this is Meditations by Marcus Aurelius. Marcus Aurelius was a Roman era emperor, and he was sort of like the ultimate sort of philosopher king in the sort of Plato-Socraterian sense, in that he was a good ruler for the context that he was in. So he was, I think 160 AD was his approximate period of time, and he was known as being a good ruler. Even and for context, he had like ultimate power, right? Like he was the emperor of Rome, which of course across all the Mediterranean, all of Europe, North Africa, Middle East. And he had essentially 100% power. So if he wanted someone gone, boom, they were gone. If he wanted to build a building, it was like, boom, everyone's running to do it. Anything in the material world was essentially his, in his context at the time. So this is a person who had ultimate power and didn't abuse it. And there's lots of Roman emperors who definitely did do that. You know, you can like look at Nero or different guys who were, abused their power, enslaved people, and did terrible things and built bridges to nowhere and all sorts of stuff. So he was known, at least for his context that he was living in, as sort of like a very ideal leader and a good person to look to. And he was unique in the sense that he would actually bring smart people to him and he would learn from them. And then he would actually take notes on his own personal journal at the end of the day on essentially how to move through reality, how to move on a day-to-day basis through trials and tribulations. And this was super useful for me, powering through back injuries and other injuries and my autoimmune stuff and all the rest. So there's three big things. The first one is you don't control outcomes. The second one is you should view things objectively. And the third one is a sort of decision-making process on how to make decisions both small and large in your life. So the first one is outcomes. This is a key insight. I use this on a day-to-day basis all the time when I'm watching the news, talking to friends, hanging out with whomever, family, whatnot, is that you don't control outcomes. So what does that really mean? Let's just think about it for a second, right? I think this is useful. Most people, when they go through their day, if they don't get the job they like, or if something bad happens, they often go, I created this, because they feel like they've got control. But in reality, in most cases, I actually don't think that's the case. So if you go zoom out for a 1,000-mile lens, do you control the stars and the planets circling around or whatever? Probably not. Do you control, the weather? Do you control earthquakes? Do you control, even people around you? Do you control other countries or world leaders? Or do you control people in your family? Not really, right? And then you can even break this down at the micro. It's like, do you control, the outcome of a football game you're watching? Or, do you control the outcome of your health? Or even how you feel, right? If someone makes you mad, they, talk smack about your mom and you really love your mom. Do you control the feeling as it emerges? Do you control who you like? Or do you just sort of like them or dislike them, right? You can pinpoint it, but do you control the feelings? And we won't go into the weeds here, but I think it's actually a positive when you can let go of that control. And I'm definitely a person who's a control freak to an extent. My brain naturally goes, I want to control this space, but it is relieving when I don't have to do that. And that is good. So from the Stoic perspective, specifically the Marcus Aurelius perspective, outcomes are never in control. Your circumstance, where you're born, where you're from, all these other things, you're just slotted in a period of time, and you just got to make do with the best cards you got. So you can be, the outcome is not in your control at all. And I think that's really relieving for me personally. With my back injury, this was a relief to an extent, because I'm like, it's not my fault my back's injured. It's just the circumstance that I'm in. Time is linear, and I'm going to be in this scenario no matter what. And that's actually nice too. It was a relieving event. And then Stoics have a sort of a perspective of loving your fate, loving your circumstance regardless of what it's in. And there's lots of famous Stoics. I think it's Seneca, who was actually a slave at one point. Might be Epictetus. I think it's Seneca. Doesn't really matter. The moral story is that you can take crappy situations and you can go, you know what? I don't control the outcome here. That's totally fine. So that's the first bit. The second, and it'll make more sense, it'll come together more as we go through the next bits, because they all interlock together. So the second one is viewing things as they are, not as you perceive them to be. So viewing events in your life objectively versus sort of a subjective emotional attachment to things. So by analogy or by example, if someone burns my house down, I'm tears, I'm crying, I'm calling my mom, it's a disaster. But my worst enemy, or the person who burnt my house down, is really happy about it. So we're both of us are attaching, or these two characters are attaching different emotions to the same event. So which one of those things is actually true? Is it a good thing? Is it a bad thing? And this ties again with you don't control outcomes. You don't even know if an outcome is good or bad until the end anyways, right? And this applies to viewing things objectively. So you have to reframe, should you care about events that are happening to you? Should you care if, like, there's a comet in the sky? Should you care if you didn't get that job? Do you control the outcome? See how these things interplay nicely? So this is sort of almost a Buddhist thing. It's like you don't even know if something is good or bad until you're dead, really, because things will play out. So an extreme example of this would be something like my mom died because she had cancer. This isn't a true story, but someone dies in your family, they've got cancer, it's a tragic event. But it inspires you to go into medicine and you contribute hugely to the greater good. And maybe you cure cancer in an extreme sense, and you've saved the day. So that's an example where it's like, was that person dying a bad thing? Now, of course, in the moment it's terrible and the emotions, but in the long term, maybe there was a positive outcome in it. So that's an extreme example, but it's like, even how I am now, I don't perceive my back injury as a negative because one, I know I don't control the outcomes anyways. What's going to happen is what's going to happen. I'm just going to control my input, my perception of it, right? And then two, it's like, if I view it objectively, I've been able to level up from that injury because it forced me to look introspectively. It forced me to deal with myself in an honest way, which is, tough, tough love, to give up identities that I was, I'm not the athlete anymore, right? Now I'm just, Fraser in a different sense, to give that up and to embrace that fate to an extent and to embrace myself as I am in the moment, not how I perceive myself used to be. And then also there's this kind of component of, I've been able to level up with these philosophical insights. I'm a more complete person. So, when I was in football days or when I was policing, I was like the muscly jack dude. But my frameworks, which how I viewed reality, I was actually much softer. So now I'm hard, man. Like I'm ready to go. Like there's no scenario in my life really that you can put me in that I might be sad for 15 minutes, but I'm gonna clear the slate, power through it because I've got this framework. I know I don't control the outcomes. All I control is my input. And then it's like, I view things objectively as they are. If those things don't really bother me and I can't really assign value to it, one or the other, I'm just, it's gone, right? And then even things that, this cuts the other way too, right? Like, imagine you win the lottery, right? You win $1 million or 10 million bucks or whatever the case, whatever gets you going. And you're like, wow, this is the best thing ever. It might be really good for you, but what if you had like an addiction to opiates or heroin or whatever, right? All of a sudden you have a banger of a week of a summer, and then you get some fentanyl and you're done, right? So not everything can be good or bad. You sort of add a subjective narrative to it. Things are just are, and I think I'm not saying deny yourself satisfaction. So if something good happens to you and you're like, like if I'm walking through the forest and I see a bird flying in the air and I'm smelling the roses, and I feel good, I get an emotion from that. I'm not going to think too hard about whether this is good or bad and really philosophize on that. I'm going to embrace the moment and enjoy it and take it for what it is. So I'm not saying have no emotions, don't be like a rock out there in the world. But what I am definitely implying is that you get to choose how you view things, and that can be really powerful. So my back injury now, like when I talk about it, I'm like, yeah, sweet. I still don't know. Maybe maybe that back injury stopped me from falling off a cliff somewhere, because I was going to do a crazy hike, or I was going to try a backflip ski and I'd break my neck or whatever, right? So you never really know. And knowing that you don't control the outcome, both those things together is useful to frame your reality. And so then I guess the question, or the next part of that, is how do you act? Because now you've got sort of like how things are, but what do you do to move through the world effectively? And this is like the third, and to me the most key insight from Marcus Aurelius. And again, this is just his notes to himself. So it's how he himself moved through the day. And essentially what it boils down to is he would say to you, if you said, well, how do I maneuver through my suffering, or good days or bad days, tell me what to do. And what he would say roughly would be to be good in nature. So what does that mean? So the goodness in the Roman or the Stoic kind of sense, in the Marcus Aurelius sense, would be, it's like sort of a technical thing. It'd be like to be for others, roughly, or to have a vision of your life, to be for others, and to take as much responsibility as possible. So it's not so much pursue your passion. It's not like, I want to be an artist and I'm going to do it. It's more like, what can you do given your context, being born in the certain period of time you're at, and your certain skill sets and your certain intuitions of what you're going to be good at? What is the ultimate thing that you can do for society, for the world, for yourself, but also for the people around you? And that can be micro, but also macro. It's up to the individual. And essentially, to Marcus Aurelius, he would say that's what humans are for. So a dog is a dog, a cat is a cat, and a human is a human, and a human is a social animal and should be for others or for the group. Now, again, it's specific to each individual person in the context that you're in, right? So some people might be like, I'm going to be an artist and inspire people. Others would be like, I want to be a doctor, or I want to be a lawyer, or whatever the case may be. I want to have a family. Whatever it is to you, whatever your ultimate vision is, your contribution, what your intuition tells you, the dream you see, the vision you see that scares you the most, that's probably the right path. And of course, that can change given context. If you're in World War II, you could be like, my biggest contribution is to be a soldier in the military, or whatever the case. So it's not about pleasure. It's not about feeling good. It's about where can you put the best bang for buck. And then to be good in nature is just like, the universe, the community, the logos, if you're getting into the sort of Stoic kind of jargon or whatever. But essentially it's just like to be good in your surroundings. And so essentially, once you've figured out that vision, that's in the distance. And then you've got sort of your decision process, which always points towards that. So what does that look like in real life? So for example, if you were an athlete and you're like, man, I want to be a professional athlete, and that was your vision, and again, you're inspiring for others, that's the ultimate contribution you can make and the ultimate responsibility you can bear. You're putting the cross on your back. This is my ultimate intuition of what I should do in my life, let's say, and you want to be an athlete. So you're pursuing that, and then your bros come up to you, or your girls or whatever, and they say, let's go out and go drinking. It's Friday night. We got to decompress. Now that can make sense, and then you run that through the process. So two scenarios can occur. It's just a yes or a no, right? Well, if you've been training for like 3 months straight and you are like stressed out, you're like, oh, I'm done, I'm burning out. Maybe going out is the best thing for you. You say yes and you go out. Right? But maybe you partied 4 days in a row because you're that dude or you're that girl, and you go, you know what? Maybe I shouldn't go do that. It's easy. It's an easy answer. It's just sort of yes or no based on the context. So it's not like categorical imperative where it's like, it's always wrong or it's always right. It's based on sort of the golden mean, the what makes sense in the context. So for me with my back injury, sometimes I'd be laying there like a dog, especially when I was right after my back surgery. I was like, concerned with my ability to, continue to move forward, let's say. So I'm laying in my bed and I go, should I go to work and, protect people and serve the community as a police officer? And yes or no, boom, it's yes. Immediately I'm out of bed. Because now I'm philosophically or ethically compelled to do that action. And then I get to work and I'm like, should I dog it and just collect the paycheck, or should I actually put in the work here and, do something useful in the work that I was doing? Boom, easy answer. I'm grinding. Now, of course, maybe I've worked like 6 months straight and I'm dying in pain here. Maybe I need the day off. Maybe I should just take a day off. But it's easy answers. And I can tell you, if you have that piece where it's like, the decision process with you don't control outcomes, and two, viewing reality as it is as much as possible objectively, that's a powerful concoction of concepts that stack nicely on top of each other and help me, and I think maybe could help you move through the world in an effective manner. I use this all the time. Like once I realized my back injury was sort of a permanent thing, one of the questions I asked myself in these macro questions, I was like, should I stay in this job and be not as effective as possible, or should I pivot to something else that's more relevant? My vision has changed a bit because of my context, right? Easy decision, boom, cut the cord, moving on. Don't regret that for a second, because again, even if it fails by my own definition, I don't control the outcome. So if I'm making the right decision in the moment, I can't regret that because it was the right decision in the moment. See the juice there? So it's like, imagine, you just keep doing that over and over and over again, making the right decision in the moment. How can you have a life you regret if every decision is the right one? Now, of course, you don't know how your life will go. So each decision is sort of like based in its own moment in time. They're not connected necessarily. And if the situation that I'm in right now, if I needed to pivot, I instantly would, because I'm obligated to do so, because it's my ultimate vision, whatever that is, right? Now, of course, that can be, I've leveraged this on a day-to-day basis. Should I eat breakfast, right? Yes or no? Well, I'm better with breakfast and I have more energy. I can be better towards my vision, to be for the community, or whatever it is for you, whatever that calling is, right? And not calling as in passion, but whatever that responsibility is, right? I'll be a better father to my children. I'll be a better mother to my kids if I'm got food in the stomach. Boom, easy. I'm eating breakfast, right? Should I eat donuts in the tub, or should I, have a smoothie or whatever's healthy in your world? Easy answer. But if you've been eating healthy for like 6 weeks and you need that burger in the tub or whatever, or a donut or whatnot, maybe that's the answer. Again, it's the golden mean, right? It's sort of you got to figure out what makes sense in the context of your day. And I think that's super powerful. To me, it's elegant, but also kind of beautiful how you can literally make a decision and then not regret it. And I've made decisions where it made sense in the moment, and then old Fraser would have been like, that was a massive mistake, right? Oh my God, I've screwed myself or whatever. But then I go, is this actually bad, this outcome? Oh, I don't know. Well, maybe who knows? Do I control the outcome? Hell no. Do I, how should I view this? Is there an opportunity in this? Can I reframe it? Boom, instantly reframing. Super useful. So essentially, now that I've got that, it's like a quasi sort of superpower in the sense that I move through adversity extremely well. Because an adverse scenario happens, should I act in a poor manner or a good manner based on the vision of being for others? It's a very easy decision to pivot out of that, and I think that's extremely useful. So that's it for the Roman era Stoic 3 main principles that I use on a day-to-day basis to power through adversity. I can honestly tell you that I use those 3 things all the time: no controlling outcomes, view things objectively, and the decision-making process. I use it all the time. I use it. I'm out of the woods with my back now. I'm out of the woods with the autoimmune stuff. But I would not have been able to power through that time in my life without these insights. I can tell you, having a lower back injury is pretty common in policing. You wear all the gear, and lots of guys work out inappropriately, lifting too much heavy weights. So this is a common injury, and I can tell you, being around, being in the office with all the other broken toys, that some people handle their situations really well. Whether it's not just backs, but other diseases, processes, things like that. And some people handled it less well. And I can say personally that I feel like I handled things extremely well in comparison to my peers, not because I'm better in any way, shape, or form. It's because I created a framework to view those things in a way that was useful for me, it didn't bring me down. So this Stoic those 3 principles I've used and continue to use to deal with adversity, but not just in adversity. I continue to use those insights to live a good life. I can tell you that since adopting those principles, I have yet to have a day when I'm actually following it that I regret, because I'm making the right decision in the moment, which is sort of like that ultimate vision calling and actioning it. So really, if you keep doing that on a day-to-day basis, whether you're in a wheelchair and you're quadriplegic or whatever the case may be, you can still action that vision regardless. Again, it'll change based on the context of the situation you're in. So you can be in a prison, in some godforsaken place where you're getting tortured every day, or you can be like a billionaire on the top of the mountain on the social hierarchy. In both those scenarios, these principles apply, and I think if you leverage them, at least for me, my quality of life is increased, and my comfort with discomfort has only gotten better and improved. And I really truly believe that those insights that have sort of peeled again are axiomatically true. I think they'll work for anyone who leverages them. So that's sort of it. We'll go through the other 2 main points of my wheel of misfortune, the logotherapy, and as well as the mechanical insights in the next 2 videos. that I'll make, and I think the logotherapy one will be really useful because essentially it's all about meaning and how you can turn suffering into a meaningful event. And I think that's super good. And if you add it with the Stoic stuff, it's a whole philosophy of life just right there. So hopefully tune in for the next one, and we'll go from there. Thanks for listening to me blab. I appreciate it.